Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the CELADON Pharmaceuticals plc Interim Results Investor Presentation. Throughout this recorded presentation, investors will be in listen-only mode. Questions are encouraged. They can be submitted at any time via the Q&A tab that's just situated on the right-hand corner of your screen. Please just simply type in your questions and press send. The company may not be in a position to answer every question it receives during the meeting itself. However, the company can review all questions submitted today and will publish those responses where it is appropriate to do so. Before we begin, as usual, we would just like to submit the following poll, and if you could give that your kind attention, I'm sure the company would be most grateful. And I would now like to hand you over to CEO James Short. James, good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon, and thank you everybody for joining today. I'm also joined by, for those of you who don't know me, I'm James Short, the CEO and co-founder of CELADON Pharmaceuticals. I'm also joined by Jonathan Turner, our CFO. So for those that don't know the company, I'd like to just reiterate that CELADON, when I founded the company, was set up on the basis that we are to produce a pharmaceutical grade product that will help the quality of life for patients that aren't currently getting it from their current medication. Over the past 5 to 6 years, we've been developing products. We now have products that are in the market. And our vision is now started to come to fruition as we're getting some really good feedback from patients. There are a number of things that I want to go through today on this slide. At the top of the slide there, it mentions a recent contract that we signed. I'll talk about that a little bit more on another slide, but I want to reiterate that we are continuing to deliver on our strategy and our operational goals. Needless to say, we have had several bumps in the road, but there are two real fundamental ones that I want to try and get over on this podcast. And I don't want these to come across as excuses. It's things that have been completely out of our control. So the first one, as I've mentioned several times, we have been hamstrung by regulators, partly because one regulator we deal with has spent the past 80 years stopping the movement of narcotics. So we've now had to create a new mindset with them. And the other regulator we deal with, which is the pharmaceutical side, the MHRA, they haven't got the bandwidth or experience within this market. We've managed over the years to take them through that journey, but it has had significant impact on our time into market. I used to think that was between 3 and 6 months. Now we actually think it's in excess of 12 months. And as you can imagine, when you put a business plan together and a model, you try and factor all these things in, but that is one that has been completely out of our control. Again, I don't want you thinking I'm using it as an excuse. We're not. I just want to get that over to the market because the market is saying, why is it taking us so long to get to productivity? The other fundamental thing is the financial markets. That's, again, something that is completely out of our control. I'm sort of fortunate or unfortunate to have gone through 2 recessions in my career, and this feels like a third one. I know that the government are not saying we're in a recession, but trust me, it does feel like one, especially the capital market. So again, when you are a business that you're trying to grow at pace, businesses need capital, and we have been hamstrung at getting to that. However, the positive side of it is because we've got a lot of experience within the business, we have managed to deliver on some really good positive things, such as, we've had our 12 harvest out of our phase 1. We are on target to do our 16th harvest by the end of this year. Our phase 2 is now fully built. We just now have to finish off the finishing bits, such as the lights and the beds, etc. Now, to finish that, it will require more capital. We have been talking to the market, the financial market, for the past 12 months. We've had some real good interest now. And the reason why I say now is because in the early days it was hard because we couldn't prove we could produce the product, we couldn't prove we could sell it. We can now prove that. So we do feel that that's coming back a little bit, albeit the capital market is still very slow, and I think a lot of it, they're waiting to get the budget out of the way as well. What we have managed to do, though, in the meantime, is try to solve to our revenue growth a little bit differently. You may or may not have seen that we announced several weeks ago we signed a joint venture and a license agreement with a Danish company called Valeos. So this is a company very similar to CELADON that have built capacity out, they've got production, they approached us to license some of our technology and know-how to enable them to produce more product and a higher quality product. It's took us a long time to get that deal over the line because of regulatory framework again, but we've done that. I know that we RNS'd it, and some of the feedback we got was the RNS was quite confusing. So today is about me trying to explain in a very short space the benefits of this deal. So for CELADON, one, it cements the fact that we have been developing IP over the past 4 to 5 years. How that cements it is because this company, i.e. Valeos, are paying us circa £1.5 million a year for the next 5 years to access our IP. So we've managed to create some value there. The other benefit to CELADON, it means it gives us a footprint in Europe to help us supply to our European contract. You may or may not remember we signed a very large contract at the back end of last year. And this deal now allows us to supply to that German pharmaceutical company. It means we save time, i.e. because of Brexit moving product from the UK to Europe, and it also saves us money because of the cost of not having to transport it. What the deal also does for us is, once we've implemented our technology and once we're starting to grow within Valeos, which we hope will come on in the first half of next year, we then will share half of the increase of the yield. So in other words, it's a 50-50 share. So if everything goes to plan, we could potentially be getting an extra revenue of £8 million a year into CELADON with no capex cost to CELADON at all. So the real benefit of this means we get more revenue, which means we can use that revenue to further fit out our phase 2. That's on the proviso that we can't raise further capital to finish phase 2. Or if further capital is too expensive, we'll just keep getting the cash from the Valeos deal, and that'll help us fit out phase 2. So as a recap, we are delivering on what we're saying. Yes, it's slightly delayed, but we're strategically delivering on what we're saying. We've started to get further contracts within the UK. We announced one middle of last week, I think it was. So at the moment, we've now got contracts that could total potentially £40 million of revenue. Again, that all helps when we're talking to raising further capital with potential debt investors. The other one is further developing of our facility. Again, we've mentioned the harvest, etc., that we're doing. So, I'll sum it up at the end, but what I'd like to do now is just hand over to Jonathan, and he'll just talk you through the financials, and then we can do the summing up at the end. On that, John, I'll hand you over to you on the financials.
Thank you, Jim. Good afternoon, everyone. I think, as Jim said, there have been, unfortunately, a number of delays, partly with licensing and partly because the infrastructure of the medical cannabis industry in the UK is developing. It was only legalised back in the end of 2018. So we've had some delays. You'll have seen we reported in onboarding some testing clinics, which meant that some of the revenue in the first half of the year was lower than we had anticipated. The revenue came in at £63,000. We had an operating loss of £2.3 million, which is down about £1 million on last year's figure for the first half of £3.2 million. That reduction is largely because we have reduced spend on external advisors, and there's an element of addressing some of the staff headcount at the start of this year. Unfortunately, you will have seen some announcements over the course of the summer about our cash balance. At the end of June, our cash balance was £16,000. You'll have seen that we have done a couple of fundraisings since then, and at the end of September, our cash balance was £500,000. As we've announced previously, we anticipate that if we carefully manage our cash and creditors, that should take us through to December. The next one of the slide is about the inventory. You'll see that we had about just under £320,000 worth of inventory at the end of June. That includes some of the stock that has been. So there's the way the cannabis is accounted for is whilst it is being cultivated, it is treated as something called a biological asset. So those are things that are still being grown and being taking up nutrients and respiring, etc. Before we can actually sell that product to clinics and pharmacies, we have to harvest it. So we cut the plant down, and at that point in time, it stops being a biological asset and is instead treated as something called an agricultural product, and that falls within our inventory balances. That product is then dried and then is tested and processed for onward supply to our customers. So that inventory balance of £320,000 includes some of the value of stock that should be available to sell in the second half. And then, as I mentioned, the biological assets, that's the value of the product that was growing as at 30th of June 2024. And then I've already touched on the next bullet point in terms of some delays in funding that we had anticipated. And we are continuing to remain in dialogue with those providers, and there are some further ongoing positive conversations with potential institutional investors about longer-term debt facilities. With that, I think that's it. So I don't know, Jim, if there's anything else you wanted to say, or if we open the floor for questions.
No, thank you for that, John. So we'll open the floor to some questions. There's some come through, and I'll try and go through them as quick as I can. So one of the questions is around, there are a couple of other operators now coming online in the UK, and how are we protected with our advance of being first mover advantage? And I'm asked this several times from lots of different people, and the potential size of this market in the UK alone is huge. We will need tens of CELADONs in the marketplace. So we actually know the two other operators, that one has just received the licensing, another one is due to get there. So we do talk to them, we work with them, we welcome them. We actually produce a different product than them, and our strategy is slightly different than them. So we don't necessarily today see them as a competitor, because it's such a new market. Now that could change in 5, 10, 15, 20 years, but the advantage we've got is we've been very, very, very focused on developing IP. And that comes on to another question of, the IP that we have developed that's on here. And we're very proud of the IP that we've developed. Not only will it give us better revenues, better yields, but it actually keeps us ahead of the curve. One of the other comments is important to establish relationship with healthcare clinics. We are actually, we do talk to a lot of the healthcare clinics. We actually have developed a training area within our facility, so we invite those people to the site. So we work very, very closely with the market. We also work closely with the NHS and people like that. So there's two markets for us. Eventually, we'd like to go direct into the NHS, but that's a long time off. So we do work very closely with the market, i.e. new entries, and also the existing clinics. Just on that point, what we are finding for demand for product, and I knew that we'd created a bit of a moat, and I knew there were going to be demand, but it's far exceeded even my expectations, the demand for the product currently in the UK, which is really what we have to do now as CELADON, is fetch more product online and keep grabbing hold of that market share. Next question, market development. Yeah, so the next question is, is there growing space in the market and particularly market regulatory developments? There is a lot more development going on with regulators, and we're working very close with all regulators to the point the regulators are starting to clamp down on some of the product coming into the UK, which again helps us being a UK producer. And the reason why they're clamping down is because it's not hitting the standards that the UK regulators, are expecting it to hit. Another question is, campaign trial important part of CELADON's strategy? Yes, it is. So just to recap on that, we own the only UK government-approved campaign trial. It's classed as a CTIMP. It's for chronic pain. We did a 3-month observation study on 100 patients. The results was astonishing. We actually did an RNS. We got York University to study that data, and we did an RNS on the back of that. We are hoping to launch that at some point next year. That gives us the ability to go out to up to 5,000 patients on the study. We've got it approved to either give it free or charge. We do believe that's one that's really going to help supercharge the UK market. But again, we want to ensure that we've got the product available for when we launch that. And that's it. There's no more questions.
James, Jonathan, if I may just jump back in there, and thank you for your presentation this afternoon and for addressing all of those questions that came in from investors. And of course, if there are any further questions that do come through, we'll make these available to you immediately after the presentation has ended, just for you to review, to then add any additional responses, of course, where it's appropriate to do so. And we'll publish all those responses out on the platform. But James, perhaps before really just looking to redirect those on the call to provide you with their feedback, which I know is particularly important to yourself and the company, if I could please just ask you for a few closing comments just to wrap up with, that'd be great.
Yeah, I always try and wrap up and thank the existing shareholders and hopefully new shareholders coming in and the supporters of the business. But, and we do get a lot of feedback, a lot of comments of, how come the share price has dropped off, et cetera, et cetera. And I don't always like saying, well, look at all the other businesses on AIM. What I do like to say is, we are sticking to our values. We're sticking to delivering our products. We are now doing it. Yes, we've been delayed, but we can see the light at the end of the tunnel now. What we now need to do is just get more cash on balance sheet and just keep going and capturing that market space. We are in a very, very, very good and strong position. And I even get some shareholders saying, should they stay in, should they not? Well, obviously, I'm going to say I want you to stay in. We want you to support us. So, I can't say any more than thank you for your support. And hopefully it should get a little bit easier moving in now that we've got all the licenses that's needed. So once again, thank you for your support.
That's great. James, Jonathan, thank you once again for updating investors this afternoon. Could I please ask investors not to close this session, as you'll now be automatically redirected for the opportunity to provide your feedback in order that the management team can really better understand your views and expectations. This will only take a few moments to complete, but I'm sure will be greatly valued by the company. On behalf of the management team of CELADON Pharmaceuticals PLC, we would like to thank you for attending today's presentation. That now concludes today's session, so good afternoon to you all.